Well, tell me some of the challenges you faced early on in your legal career.
So I would say that when I first graduated from law school, a lot of people are coveting the big firm jobs, and I did a big firm clerkship, and it didn't work out, and it was fine. I don't think I would have been a big firm person, but I think because I was a little bit older, I was in my early 30s at that point. I think a lot of employers probably thought, oh, well, she's going to start having children, and she's going to start, she's not going to be, we're not going to be able to grind her up. And so it was just a different situation. So I ended up getting a job in Houston. And, I think the challenge for me was that I really felt like a fish out of water. I felt like it was day one of school every day, just that nervousness and not knowing what's going on, not understanding things and being scared. So I would say the anxiety that came with knowing how much I did not know, that was, I think, the biggest challenge early on.
That's interesting. In my undergrad, I took a couple pre-laws. I wasn't pre-law, but I took a couple law classes. And one of those teachers is who I had write one of my recommendations when you're doing your law school applications.
Mm.
And one thing she said that I had never thought about myself before is that Cheryl knows that there's a lot she doesn't know, and that
Yeah.
will serve her well. And I never thought about that because, and I think that is also a difference between being 22 in law school and being 30 or 32 in law school. You've learned, oh, there's a lot of things I don't know. I know a lot, but there's a
Yeah.
lot more out there I don't know. And that's really important when you're going into law to realize there is so much. You're never going to be able to know everything, but law school is so good at teaching you how to find the answers and how to find the resources for those answers because it's so vital to have connections where you can, like you did with Frank, he immediately told you, well, that's not my area, but
Yeah.
here's an alternative resource that might help you find that. So
Yeah.
that's really great. Well, what type of law did you go into early on?
So, wait, I got to give a shout out to Frank because not only did he point me in the right direction, but he helped me with my personal statement. He was my biggest cheerleader, I think, and one of the few that I confided in because, like I said, I did not fully commit from day one. It was, the incident with Maria was enough to kind of get the ball rolling, but ultimately, he was one of the few that was really like in the loop in terms of what I was going to do. And then once I was fully committed, everybody knew. So I just have to give a shout out to Frank. But I went into my first legal job. So I clerked doing family law. I worked at a family law boutique firm in Houston and, really prestigious law firm. But I didn't really have anything like super interesting because I was, I was a very small player there. So they gave me very little assignments, but I liked all the attorneys. It was just a labor and I mean, it was a family law firm. And so it was good to kind of see how a boutique firm worked. But I don't really think it was like a hiring opportunity or anything like that. And so when I graduated from law school, I ended up going into labor and employment law. I had clerked at the big firm doing labor and employment law. And so I found a boutique firm in Houston and I worked there for about 2 years. And it was defense side. Of course, it didn't feel great. And it didn't feel like it aligned with why I went to law school to begin with. I went to law school to sort of, help the good guy. And I didn't always feel like I was helping the good guy. And so that, it was, the work was interesting, but I wouldn't say that it was the right fit. And so after that, I ended up moving to Austin. That was in Houston. I ended up moving to Austin and I worked in-house for a friend of mine. He started a company. So it was a startup company. This was right around 2008, 2009. And so I went to go work for him. And I mean, I was like, people don't go in-house until they have like at least 7 years, in the trenches. And he was like, no, you're the one that I want. So I came to work for him. And I worked for him for about 3 years, but I realized like I really am not a transactional attorney. I needed the action. I miss the action. It's not like I really had a lot of action in my first legal job, but I wanted some action. And I would talk to my friends who were in the thick of it at big firms, trial prep, staying up all night, stress beyond belief. And I remember feeling like envious, like, I want some of that, you know? And it's crazy to think now that I would want some of that. I don't want some of that. But back then I was like, I want, like, I was just like, I want the action. And so after I was there for about 3 years, we entered like a little bit of a slow period. And I asked him if I could go and start doing child protective services again. I had done the children's rights clinic when I was at UT and I loved it. And the children's rights clinic, you solely represent children in foster care, children involved with child protective services. And so I thought, I really enjoyed that my last year of law school. And so I was like, let me go and revisit that. So I asked him if he was okay with it. He said yes. And I did it. And then 6 months later, I left the company and I started to do that full time.